You mentioned there that the establishment have captured the prosecution system, the judicial system and everything. You didn't mention the media. Don't you think that they've been captured by the establishment? This is have we got a state media? This is...
Well, absolutely. The media in Jersey, I mean, that's not really a surprising observation. The media in Jersey has been wholly captured by the island's entrenched oligarchy, and has been for decades, actually. If you, for example, study the wretched history of the Jersey Evening Post, even back in post-war years into the decades immediately following World War II, the extremist, lunatic propaganda that the Jersey Evening Post churned out against anyone that stood up and might become a prominent opposition figure to the oligarchy. These people were absolutely hammered and treated disgracefully, like old Norman de Brock, for example, the disgraceful treatment he had to endure at the hands of the Jersey Evening Post. So Jersey's media has always been corrupt and biased. I think the most difficult thing, I suppose, that has to be considered with the performance of the mainstream media in Jersey is the role of the BBC. I mean, we can't be surprised that Channel Television, FM 103 and the Jersey Evening Post in particular are just nakedly unashamed propaganda vessels for the oligarchy, which they are. I mean, anyone can, read the published facts, the evidenced facts. People can now read for themselves on my blog, on your blog, on Mr. Sauder's blog, on other blogs too. And this is the great problem, of course, that the Jersey media now face, which is why they have to oppress people like me, because in the decades gone by, they've had the total control over what the public did or didn't get to know. With the age of the internet, of course, that control, that power is gone. And sooner or later, it hasn't happened yet, but I think it's an inevitability, the broad population of Jersey will wake up to the fact that, hold on a minute, everything that's appearing or everything that's being omitted in our mainstream media, this is very serious actually, and here are these independent journalists, web-based journalists, who are actually publishing the factual evidence. And that's a very difficult thing for the Jersey mainstream media, because one day suddenly their entire credibility will collapse in the eyes of the broad population, which is another reason why the Jersey establishment has to oppress citizens media journalists, because we're a threat to the whole credibility of their traditional propaganda apparatus. The BBC's position is extremely serious. I mean, the BBC in Jersey has effectively been captured. For example, the BBC has in their possession a copy of the 94-page statement written by the former Chief of Police Graham Power to the Wiltshire Police Force. And this is a dynamite piece of evidence, very substantial. How
long have they had this statement? I think it's close on to 3 months.
Probably going on for 4 months, I would say now. They've had this absolutely dynamite, apocalyptic piece of evidence. Now, to any self-respecting journalist, you get handed a piece of evidence like this on a plate without even having to go out and look for it, without having to do any work and do any investigative work. Somebody's come to you and given you this absolutely extraordinary evidential document of historic significance. And this, to any self-respecting journalist, this would be like all your Christmases had come at once. You'd be, God, I can't wait to get stories out about this. Go seek out the people in the report, question them, seek their side of the story. There's been a deafening silence about this from the BBC. Now, the BBC holds itself up, and indeed the British establishment hold the BBC up, as perhaps the shining example of media to the rest of the world. Supposedly the most reliable, the most non-political, the most fearless, the absolutely purest media in the world. Now, that's the image that the BBC has of itself. It's the image that the British government has of the BBC, and this is the image that is projected to the rest of the world. Yet the BBC has quite clearly, on the evidence, been wholly corrupted in respect of its coverage in Jersey, and indeed nationally. The BBC has effectively had to go along with the captured state of BBC Jersey by not reporting stories that they've been given nationally that might contradict the local corrupted stance that BBC Jersey has taken.
This is where I say, because you mentioned omissions earlier. Now, because the BBC have broadcast the prosecution case against Graham Power.
Indeed.
They've interviewed Ian Lamarco on it. They went to the press conference that Ian Lamarco had. We called it the Kangaroo Court, which we still believe it was. So they have broadcast and published one side of the story. Now they've got the other side, have had the other side for 3 months or so. Why haven't they reported it?
Well, I mean,
they've got an obligation to, haven't they?
Well, they are. I mean, what the BBC are doing is clearly in direct conflict with their charter. It's not fulfilling the charter. It isn't fulfilling the public duty role that the BBC has. Well, you could say that all media has a public duty, role in a Western democratic society, but the BBC especially has that role because the BBC uniquely is funded by the people who pay the licence fee.
Yeah.
So the BBC owes its existence, it owes its money to ordinary rank and file people up and down the country. So the BBC is especially obligated, given that great advantage, that great privilege it has of being funded directly by the public. The public duty responsibility that the BBC has is doubly, triply important. Yet that duty has been manifestly failed in the Jersey context. Moreover, given that broadcast media is bound by the Broadcasting Act to be balanced, they're actually breaking the law.
They haven't got the balance out, have they?
This is absolutely right. This is simply a stark fact that's there for anyone to see who wants to just consider the facts. You're quite right. When the BBC were given the same propaganda by the Jersey authorities about the Graham Power situation, they peddled and spouted this nonsense unquestioningly, uncritically, along with the rest of the Jersey establishment media. Now the BBC have been given the other side of the story, and we have this deafening silence from them. Well, now, this is simply the actions of a corrupted organisation, and it doesn't stop there. I mean, I've had some conversations with BBC journalists, one or two within Jersey, but actually the more significant ones are actually with a couple of different national journalists. And I think I've spoken in detail to 3 individual reporters within the BBC who work at a national level. And initially they've seemed interested in, as any journalist would, in the kind of evidence that we have about the breakdown in the rule of law in Jersey. But then they kind of speak to their BBC Jersey colleagues, and suddenly they just disappear. There's suddenly all interest just evaporates. And there's this simple omerta, this wall of silence that the BBC journalists nationally even go along with.
So Deputy Trevor Pittman and Senator Ian Lamarca were on with Roger Barra on BBC Radio Jersey, and Deputy Pittman said, because he has a copy of Graham Power's Wiltshire, he got it through scrutiny, I believe.
That's correct, yes, I furnished a copy to the scrutiny panel, yeah.
And now Deputy Pittman said he could redact this Wiltshire report, Graham Power statements of Wiltshire, with a bottle of Tipex and 2 hours.
Certainly, yes. And
you say that's you agree with that, do you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, frankly, there is no legal reason, given the evidence nature of it, and other examples of evidence that are out there that it could be paired up with. There's no real reason why several of the key names in the document couldn't be published. I mean, frankly, they should be. There are people that have done clearly improper things that involve professional misconduct, even criminal offences. There are clearly people identified in the report whose conduct must amount to conspiracies to pervert the course of justice, and whose conduct must amount to misconduct in a public office. And certainly, as long as you go to these people and put these issues to them and give them a chance to have their say, frankly, there's no reason why their names couldn't be reported. But nevertheless, assuming that an organisation like the BBC would want to be ultra cautious, you're quite right, they could redact all names out of the report and then publish or report the great majority of it. And it would be an easy thing to do, you're quite right, it might take 2 hours, yes, with a bottle of Tipex to redact it. It wouldn't be any great issue at all.
They're obviously not worried about the exclusive, are they? Because every time you give somebody a journalist a scoop, they can think, right, I better get this out.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Every day that goes past,
you don't sit on a hot story.
So that's right. So it doesn't look like the BBC are going to publish this. So it sounds like dynamite. It sounds damning stuff that you've got hold of. Are you going to publish parts of it? Any of it? All of it?
Yes, eventually. And how and when that will happen remains to be determined. But clearly, unambiguously, it falls four square within public interest disclosure. It's absolute meat and drink to any self-respecting journalist. You know, if this was had been done to a police officer in the United Kingdom, and the national media got hold of a report like this, you know, the Guardian or the BBC in the UK or whatever, they would be doing huge stories about this. And of course, those stories would be apocalyptically damaging and embarrassing to the relevant authorities, but that's just tough. You know, these kind of things get exposed in democratic societies. One of the functions people like you and me have had to fulfill, sadly, we've had to take this burden onto our shoulders. We've had to effectively become the fourth estate in Jersey. We've had to become the island's investigative journalists. We've had to become the challenging media, because the mainstream media in Jersey is so obviously captured and corrupted. So yes, and journalistically, sooner or later, this material will have to be published.